¿Sabes cómo los jugadores al final del juego se quitan la camisa y se la intercambian? Los mexicanos se ponen la de Estados Unidos, los Estados Unidos se ponen la de México. ¿Quieren hacer eso ahora rapidito? ¿Quieren intercambiar el jersey? No. ¿No? ¿No exchange jerseys? Mexico for USA? No. ¿Quieren intercambiar el jersey?
¿Estás loco?
¿México por Estados Unidos?
No.
Hey guys, you want to exchange jerseys? No. Oh. Nobody? Oye, ¿quieres una Coca-Cola? Tengo una extra.
¿Está buena?
Sí, ahí tienes. Si quieres, espérate. Te la abro ahora.
Hey, do you want an extra Coke? I have an extra one.
Ya que somos amigos, ¿quieres una Coca-Cola?
Orlando te llamas.
Orlando, sí, sí. Oye, mira, de repente, ¿quieren una Coca-Cola? ¿Sabes cómo se intercambian los jerseys, los jugadores del equipo? ¿Quieres hacer eso bien rápido ahora?
Just to show that we're like, you know, we're one. We're like, there's no need for rivalry and crazy stuff, you know? All right, whatever, it'll be fine. Like, who cares?
Let's do it.
Yeah, you want to do it?
I'm done.
Want to do it? You down?
México, Estados Unidos. It'll be fun, man.
I don't know if my shirt will fit me though.
Yeah?
I don't know if it fits me.
There you go. That's okay, USA, México. Estados Unidos, México. Gracias, bueno, Mexico.
USA.
USA, man.
Welcome to CHCI's Leadership Luncheon. Please welcome Peter Villegas, Vice President of Latin Affairs from this year's Public Policy Conference host sponsor, the Coca-Cola Company.
Buenos dias. Good afternoon. Welcome to today's luncheon. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video. It really speaks to what our mission is, which is bringing people together, bringing cultures together to celebrate one another. On behalf of my colleagues at Coca-Cola, especially Rudy Becerra and Curtis Etherly, we thank you for being with us today, and we celebrate today's and this week's discussions as we serve as the conference host. Our partnership with the Congressional Hispanic Caucus Institute runs wide, it runs deep, from Atlanta, Georgia to Los Angeles and everywhere in between. We have locked arms with the Congressional Hispanic Caucus Institute to make sure that we're addressing the needs of our communities, not just for Latinos, but for all Americans. And I want to congratulate the CHCI for their tremendous efforts and celebrate their work this week at the Policy Conference. Give them a round of applause, please. Now, an example of that leadership is the special guest that we have today, Attorney General Lynch. I want to thank her for being with us today. I think it's a great example of the leadership that we provide and the type of relationships that the CHCI has developed over the years. You'll be hearing from some freshman congressional members talking about their new role in Congress. I'm happy to say that all three are from the Southwest, where I live. Congresswoman Norma Torres, my Congressmember, Mr. Pete Aguilar, and Ruben Gallego from Arizona. Now, I'm from Los Angeles. So, is there anyone from Los Angeles in the house? Yes. Okay. So not only am I very happy about the LA Dodgers making the playoffs, but I'm more happy and more proud of our CHC chair and CHCI chair, Congresswoman Linda Sánchez. She has done a tremendous job, not only in her role as a congressional member, but in addition, the roles that she plays here as a leader of the CHCI and CHC. It makes me very proud that I'm a good friend of hers and that she's representing not just Latinos at a very high level, but all Americans, and especially we're very proud as Californians to have her in a leadership role. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm welcome to our chair, Congresswoman Linda Sánchez.
Well done, thanks. Okay, hopefully you're highly caffeinated by now. Is that the case? Let's feel the love. No, that was weak. Weak, people, come on. Let's hear the love. Awesome. I want to thank Peter Villegas for that kind introduction. And I want to thank Coca-Cola for serving as this year's conference host, and also Entravision for their support of CHCI in today's luncheon. Our theme this year for our conference is Powering Growth and Influence, and it captures the important role that the Latino community plays in shaping the future of our country. To me, a lot of this week's conference is also a call to action. If I had $1 for every time someone talked about waking the sleeping Latino giant, I would be wealthy. All right? But it's time to harness our country's changing demographics and translate the growth in our community's numbers into increased political influence and economic power. And the only way that we are going to do that is by empowering the next generation to lead. And that's where CHCI comes in. CHCI is unique. Its history, its mission, how they accomplish that mission, and the influence that they create. CHCI aims to empower young Latinos to become part of our community's growth, to create positive change for our country. 2016 will be an election year, and it will be determined largely by Latino voters. And young Latino voters will play an especially critical role in that election cycle. This week, CHCI interns and fellows are learning how to exercise their power. They are meeting leaders from all sectors and from all over the country and learning more about what action they can take to have control over their futures. These young leaders wouldn't have the opportunity to do this without CHCI and without your support. We all have a responsibility to provide opportunities for the next generation to succeed. Equally important, our community must stay united when we are under repeated attack. Let's not forget what political candidates are saying about Latinos, about women, about minorities, about immigrants. No candidate seeking the highest office in the land should take the low road of stereotyping us to get there. These sinvergüenzas care more about their political ambitions than they do about uniting our country behind a common vision for the future. And honestly, what's more alarming is that these attacks are fueling their fanatic followers. I'm proud at how the Latino community has mobilized and how we've built coalitions denouncing bigotry and ignorance. We have sent a clear message that we will not tolerate slander or oppression in any form. Next, we need to raise our voices at the ballot box. We need to support leaders who respect our community and who recognize the contributions that we make day in and day out. We need to encourage everybody that we know to participate in every election. Powering growth and influence can only happen if every single one of us chooses consciously to act and to lead and to inspire others to act as well. Our panel after lunch will showcase some of these leaders, our new class of Latinos in Congress who are serving in their first term. And let me tell you, they are spectacular. Believe me, it takes a lot of courage to run for office. It's your name and your reputation on the ballot box that people are considering when they vote. We need courageous leaders to answer the call to public service. We need more leaders to believe that they can make a difference in their community. Hopefully, some of the leaders that are here this week will be inspired to take that bold step someday as they hear about the journeys of some of the members. And now it's my pleasure to introduce another leader who represents a first in our country, the first African-American woman to lead the Justice Department, our 83rd Attorney General, Loretta Lynch. Tellingly, she is the first Attorney General to speak at a CHCI conference, and we thank her for taking her time to do so. When President Obama announced Loretta Lynch's nomination, he said she might be the only lawyer in America who battles mobsters and drug lords and terrorists and still has a reputation for being a charming people person. He also added that she doesn't look to make headlines, she looks to make a difference. And standing in at a mere 5'2", this woman may be tiny, but she is mighty. I'm thrilled to welcome the Attorney General of the United States, Loretta Lynch. Break a leg.
How are we doing this afternoon? Good? I heard you were doing great. I heard it's been a great conference. I heard you've got outstanding new members. And I heard that this afternoon, you're going to solve all the problems that we have in the country. So I'll be back around 5 o'clock to get that memo. But I want to thank you all for inviting me to join you today. I want to thank Representative Linda Sánchez for her kind introduction. And also, Linda, I want to thank you for your service as the chair of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus Institute, a force of nature, a force of good, a force of positive thought in an often contentious city. But I also want to thank all of you. I want to thank every member of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus for organizing this event, and more importantly, for your work in developing the next generation of Latino leaders. Through programs that serve more than 1,600 young Latinos every year, and tens of thousands of more online, where of course more of our education is going, CHCI, all of you, you are giving young people around the country the opportunity to go to college, to advance in the workforce, to learn and to lead. With internship sessions on Capitol Hill, fellowships that help to deepen policy knowledge, and college scholarships that offer high school students the resources that they need to make higher education attainable, you're creating new generations of thinkers and doers. And through forums like this one that bring together so many extraordinary leaders, you are demonstrating the strength and the diversity of the Latino community as a whole. Now, I also want to take a moment and particularly welcome the members of the freshman class of the 114th Congress. Welcome to Washington. I'm also new in town. And I give you a warm welcome, but I also want to thank all of you here today, the public officials, the business leaders, the philanthropists, the union representatives, not only for your service to your districts and your communities and to your country, but also, and frankly most importantly, for the example that you provide to young people around the nation who see in your remarkable stories what is possible in America. Those examples are vitally important because, as you know, for young Latinos in America, the road to success does not always look so easy. They see a criminal justice system that disproportionately incarcerates people of color. They see discriminatory housing or lending policies that make it more difficult to own a home and provide for their families. They see onerous voting regulations that restrict their access to the ballot box and the kind of pernicious casual bigotry that is still, sadly, far too common. They see bigotry through action as well as bigotry through neglect. I remember a case that my office, my former office, the Eastern District of New York, in my life as a U.S. attorney, a case that we successfully investigated and brought to settlement when I was a U.S. attorney for the Eastern District of New York. And we found that New York's Suffolk County Police Department had actively discouraged Latino victims from filing complaints when they were the victims of crime, had actively discouraged them from cooperating with the police, and also completely failed to investigate hate crimes involving Latinos. Marcelo Lucero was a young man in Suffolk County, and he was killed not by police, but by bigoted residents of his own community who felt that they could unleash a barrage of hatred and violence on him with impunity. And sadly, those views were not far from the reality for the Latino residents of Suffolk County, who routinely suffered from both a lack of protection from the police as well as these bigoted attacks from the community. And after years of being marginalized, Latino residents came together and they mobilized through advocacy groups to raise their concerns and to spur our investigation. The settlement required sweeping changes in both outreach and investigation into matters involving the Latino community, from the availability of interpreters to the proper classification of hate crimes. Now, incidents and practices like the ones that promoted our investigation back in the Eastern District have a devastating effect, not only on the communities in which they occur, but on all of us across the country who view examples of race-based indifference as well as injustice as part of a much larger narrative. Because it's clear that by what and how we prosecute, we as a society indicate both what and whom we value and protect. And for a child, finding his or her way and looking for encouragement and support, the obstacles to advancement can seem insurmountable. Opposition to their success can seem widespread and inescapable. And too often, the lesson that they learn is it's too hard to get ahead. You know, it's too hard to change things, and it's too hard to lead. But we're here today because CHCI believes something different. You believe that with a positive, collaborative approach, we can support our young people, we can lift up our communities, and we can change our country for the better. And I want you to know that the Obama administration and the Department of Justice in particular is working to do just that. That is our commitment, and that is my pledge to you. We are committed to doing our part to tear down impediments to opportunity, to end discrimination and exploitation, and to guarantee the law's privileges and protections extend to all Americans, no matter who they are, where they come from, or where they live. We're striving every day to seek out injustice, to offer effective assistance, and to foster engagement, empowerment, and unity. And we're working to ensure that everyone in this country, everyone, has the opportunities and the support that they need to thrive. After all, it's one of our nation's most fundamental promises and one of the Justice Department's guiding principles that no one should have to endure discrimination and unfair treatment based on the qualities that make them who they are. And that's why, over the last 3 years alone, our Civil Rights Division has filed more than 100 lawsuits to combat discrimination in housing and lending. We're supporting the Department of Housing and Urban Development's new rule on affirmatively furthering fair housing, which will help break up patterns of residential segregation. And we are working aggressively to combat bias-motivated violence, in part under the Matthew Shepard and James Byrd Jr. Hate Crimes Prevention Act, signed into law by our president in 2009. But we are also working with state court systems to reduce language barriers so that people who speak limited English can effectively access court services, so that they too can come under the mantle of protection promised to all. And we are protecting the ability of English learner students to participate meaningfully and equally in educational programs. We're also aggressively enforcing the anti-discrimination provision of the Immigration and Naturalization Act, a law that went into effect almost exactly 50 years ago. Now, this law prohibits employment discrimination based on citizenship status and national origin. And in May of this year, we reached the largest settlement we've ever secured under the INA's anti-discrimination provision when we obtained $320,000 in civil penalties from a company that discriminated against work-authorized immigrants. And that settlement contributed to the more than $1.5 million in back pay and civil penalties that we secured under the provision in fiscal year 2015, more than in any other fiscal year since the statute was enacted. And we're proud of the fact that we were able to achieve that victory, but the fact that we had to bring those actions is still cause for work from all of us. But in fact, in the 7 years of the Obama administration, we have secured more in civil penalties and back pay for victims under INA's anti-discrimination provision than in all of the other years of the law's history combined. Now, of course, in addition to fighting the overt discrimination that we can see in so many instances every day, we're also working to ensure that the institutions that make up this country are both fair and effective. One of the things that we have to do, and we're working to do, we have to end the school to prison pipeline. We have to end this. We have to speak out against the zero tolerance policies in our schools, because these policies we've seen over and over and over again. They disproportionately impact young people of color. They take our children and they brand them as criminals before they have a chance to become scholars. This has to stop, and the Department of Justice is proud to lead the way. Because every young person from every background deserves the education that prepares them to contribute and to succeed. We're fighting for voting rights. We are challenging the discriminatory redistricting plans, contesting unfair restrictions on early voting, and working to reverse the rollbacks on same-day registration. All of these are important because we believe that our democracy is stronger. In fact, it's only strong at all when every American can exercise their right to participate. And we are also working to promote community policing across the nation, because we believe that every individual, law enforcement and resident alike, should feel safe and supported in their neighborhood. No one should have to endure what young Marcelo Lucero went through in order to find justice. No one. Now, this effort to promote community policing and more responsive and more responsible policing is one of my top priorities as Attorney General. Through the National Initiative for Building Community Trust and Justice, which my predecessor and your friend, Attorney General Eric Holder, launched just last year, we are pursuing a wide-ranging new approach in training, in policy and research that will help to ensure that the interactions between officers and communities of color are positive and productive, characterized by mutual support and not suspicion. Our Civil Rights Division, led by Vanita Gupta, is continuing its transformative work to promote constitutional policing in jurisdictions throughout the country, including efforts to eliminate discrimination on the basis of national origin and ethnicity, and to ensure that police services are not compromised by stereotypes or language barriers, such as we saw in the Suffolk County case. Our Office of Justice Programs, under the direction of Assistant Attorney General Carol Mason, is supporting law enforcement agencies at the state and local level with resources like grants, training, and technical assistance. And through our Office of Community-Oriented Policing Services, or COPS as it's called, under the leadership of Ron Davis, we are helping to hire and to train officers to promote officer safety and wellness, and to assist our state and local, and perhaps even most importantly, our tribal law enforcement agencies as they implement the recommendations of President Obama's Task Force on 21st Century Policing. Now, of course, in order to move forward successfully, we have to make sure that we have a full and accurate picture of what is actually happening on the ground. And that's why we at the Department of Justice are working through components and agencies like our Bureau of Justice Statistics and the FBI to examine the standards for data collection about police and resident interactions, particularly, but not limited to, violent encounters. And it's why we have partnered with leading police organizations like the International Association of Chiefs of Police, major cities chiefs, major county sheriffs, to discuss how to go about collecting data under consistent criteria. And it's why we are going even further by developing standards for publishing information about deaths in custody. These efforts are not only vital, not only necessary, not only much needed, but they will promote transparency, they'll enhance accountability, and they will give us the tools that we need to make targeted and effective improvements. Now, I also recognize, as I know many of you do, that some of the most innovative programs and promising ideas will emerge from communities themselves, from people who are living through these difficult situations. And that is why I have convened a series of community policing roundtables in cities across the country. I wanted to see how the extraordinary work that's already underway came about. How did cities that had had very challenging and difficult relationships between the police and law enforcement pull themselves back from that situation and develop a working relationship that, while not perfect, allows them to deal with some of the most challenging issues that occur? And in each of the communities that I have visited, Cincinnati, Birmingham, East Haven, Connecticut, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Seattle, and Richmond, California, I saw community residents and law enforcement working together to make real progress. I saw a willingness to communicate and to collaborate on complex challenges. And more importantly, I saw officers and young people, often Black and Latino kids from tense neighborhoods, break through long-held assumptions and historic barriers that have allowed mistrust to develop over the years. Now, for many of us in this room and beyond, the importance of that effort and of all of these efforts, it's clear, because we know what it's like to be looked at with suspicion or with skepticism by people who don't know our story or our struggle. We know what it's like to face the insinuations and accusations because of what we look like or where our parents came from or what our name is. And we know what it's like to be told not just that we're different, but that we are less than. And that matters. That lives within you. As our Supreme Court Justice Sonia Sotomayor said in a powerful opinion born of her own experience, it matters because, as she said, the slights, the snickers, the silent judgments reinforce that most crippling of thoughts, I do not belong here. And we've all lived through that. And I've shared my own experiences with Justice Sotomayor. I remember arriving for an interview at a law firm when I was coming out of law school, introducing myself to the receptionist, standing there in my bright new suit, and I won't lie to you, I looked good. Telling her I was there for my interview, and she looked at me and said, "You can't be Loretta Lynch. She goes to Harvard." Well, we've made a great deal of progress in this country. And the fact that there are so many of us who've burned through those barriers and left those moments behind to stand here all together. The fact that there's so many extraordinarily accomplished individuals in this room today. The fact that you are not only leaders of the Latino community, but leaders of this country. And the fact that I have the privilege of serving as the 83rd Attorney General of the United States under the first African American president to lead this nation shows just how far we have come. But it's clear that we still have more work to do to ensure that our journeys, the paths that brought us to this place, are possible, are open, are transparent, and are available for every child in every community across this country. And that is why the work that we're doing at the Justice Department is so important, not just to me, but for this cause. And that's why CHCI's efforts are so vital. And that's why the encouragement and the example provided by every individual here today and all our allies and partners around the country are so impactful. With our words and with our actions, we're sending a message to every bright and hopeful and hardworking child in America. You not only belong in this country, you can lead it. You can lead it. And our message to those children must go further, because we have to tell them that we will never stop working until they have all of the opportunities that they deserve. Now, as I look out over this extraordinary gathering today, I'm optimistic about all that we're going to achieve going forward. I'm sure of the rightness of our cause, and I am determined to continue the work that we have to do together. It's only together that we accomplish anything. But together we will accomplish the stronger country, the more empowered communities, and the more just society that are our common goals. Thank you once again for inviting me to share this moment with you and a little bit of this day as you focus on these important efforts. Thank you for your commitment to these efforts and your partnership in this mission. And most of all, thank you for lighting the way forward for every young person in America. They look up to you, you will lead them, and I know that together we will get to a brighter place. Thank you so very, very much.
Please enjoy your lunch. Again, thank you, Attorney General Lynch, for coming and speak to us. Please enjoy your lunch. We will resume the program shortly. Thank you.
Good afternoon. How was lunch?
Still.
All right, that's good. Want to make sure that we've got folks still paying attention. I'm delighted to be here. I'm Congresswoman Michelle Lujan Grisham from the District 1 in New Mexico, and I'm going to really put New Mexicans on the spot. I know we've got 3 New Mexicans in the House. 4. We'll make a lot more noise, those 4 over there in the corner. All right,
some more green chili.
This is one of my favorite part of the conference every year, where we introduce the bright, shining stars, the new members of the caucus, new members to Congress. And I have to tell you, it seems like just yesterday that I was in those one of those seats, talking about my campaign efforts, my vision, my thoughts for the future, and really engaging with you about what my current reflections are about the first year in Congress. And before I go to them to do that and talk with us about their experience, I want to do a couple of quick announcements. One, I want to thank Coca-Cola for being a sponsor and doing such a great job with CHCI. Thank you, Coca-Cola. Thanks for all that you're doing. And I want to highlight that we've got several members here today. At my table, we had Congressman Pedro Pierluisi from Puerto Rico. Pedro, you want to stand up and say hello? I don't know if she's still here. We had Congresswoman Loretta Sánchez, California. Is she here? Yes, there she is. Congressman Jose Serrano from New York. Congresswoman Nydia Velázquez right here from New York. Nydia. And former Representative Bob Garcia. See back out here? There he is. Thank you all very much. All right, so let's get right to the panel. I'm going to go to, actually we'll start at the very end. Let's introduce a brand new, bright, shining star, incredible member, California. Please welcome Congresswoman Norma Torres.
Thank you. Thank you.
Go.
Thank you so much, and thank you, CHCI, for the opportunity to be here with all of you, community leaders, leaders in the U.S. You know, it's not easy being a Latina in Congress. It's not easy being a Latina leader, but for me, I didn't just start in politics. My life as a leader in my community started long before I decided to run for any elected position. As a former 911 dispatcher, I took a call that changed my life forever. It was a call where an 11-year-old girl was murdered at the hands of her uncle. It took 20 minutes for me to answer that call for help. And the reason why she waited 20 minutes was because the department that I worked for had not prioritized and hired more bilingual dispatchers. So I took on that fight against, in many ways, my own department having to testify in the city of Los Angeles against my own captain. It certainly was not an easy time. But, as leaders, we're not often called to do the easy work. We're called to do the very difficult work in our communities. And that is giving the voice to those who may not find their voice. Later, I decided to run for city council. Again, I had taken on an issue in my community, taken on a huge project that was going to bring a lot of traffic noise and trash into my community. And I began a process of negotiating for my neighbors. Ultimately, I defeated the incumbent that had been elected to office for 11 years. He was a Republican, and I defeated him with his own Republican votes, winning that election. Thank you. I won that election by 75 votes. I ran for re-election 4 years later and won by 75% of the vote. 2 years later, my mayor passed away, and I ran in a special election against 11 other people. 4 of them were city council members like myself, and I won by a landslide of 250 votes. In 2008 was the first time that I ran for state office, running in the state of California State Assembly. I won by 60% of the vote there, and I spent 4 years as a state assembly member before running in a special election for state senator. So I'm happy to be in Congress, to have a much smaller constituency. In the state Senate, I represented over 1 million people, and the wonderful 7th largest economy in the world. Very proud to be a Californian. None of this was easy, and I think, as Latinas specifically, I'm talking to the young ladies here in the room, it's not easy to be the one on top. It's not easy to be the one that has the voice in your community or for your family. It's a very lonely place to be, but we all have the duty to answer our call to duty. And we are such a great representation. We need to have a seat at the table, whether it is in the US Congress, in your local city councils, in the school boards, no matter where you find. Defining leadership is not by the position that you serve. Defining leadership is the issues that you stand up for and for whom you stand up for. I truly believe that. And when my son asked me, he said to me, Mom, as children, we're supposed to do better than our parents. Now, how in the heck am I going to do, how in the heck am I going to beat you? And I said, honey, it's not my title that defines me. It's who I am that defines me. You are a veteran. Thank you. You are a veteran of the greatest military in this whole world. You will be accomplishing a lot more than I will ever accomplish in my life. And it's not my title, but it's what you do. So I hope that you will hear that message and don't inspire just for that title. Inspire to do great things in your community. We are seeing a terrible climate in politics right now. And the reason for that is not because we didn't vote. The reason for that is because we didn't stand up and we were not counted. By not going out and voting, it was as bad as voting for the other person that is calling us rapists, and thieves. They're not calling my neighbor a rapist or a thief. They're calling me a rapist and a thief because I am an immigrant. Thank you for being here today.
I think you're going to see a common theme of incredible leadership and courage. And without, let me introduce my colleague, Congressman Ruben Gallego from Arizona. Oh, fan club.
I always build an audience just in case. You never know. Well, thank you so much for having me. This is my first year as a member of Congress. I actually attended many CHCI conferences, starting, I guess, back from even when I was just in the activist, and I guess I'm still an activist. So it's interesting now being on this end of the spectrum and being able to speak. It's been a very quick transition for me, I think, into the actual political office. I largely started in politics pushing in two fronts. One, I had the privilege and the honor of serving in the United States Marine Corps as an infantryman serving in Iraq. But one of the unfortunate things that I saw in Iraq is I saw the limits of what government can do or what government chooses to do to support our military personnel. I was in a very dangerous area, the Al-Anbar province. We were severely outnumbered. We didn't have proper armor. I lost my best friends, and I think in a manner that I think was not what we expect from the United States military. And then I returned to our homeland, and the country was more worried about whether Paris Hilton or Lindsay Lohan hated each other that day, not necessarily whether we were going to get the VA services that we needed. I found myself moving to Arizona. My girlfriend had moved there while I was still in Iraq. She's my wife now, so that went well at least. I forget to bring that together. This is why I moved to Arizona, and I started trying to readjust back to life there, trying to work with the VA. I ended up having a very bad experience with the VA. And not that the VA is a bad experience all the time, but at that point, it took me about 1.5 years to get the surgery I needed on my knee so I could walk around and not have to have any assistance. But while at the same time being very aggravated about that, I also did see a trend that was starting to grow of politicians really picking on the Latino community and using us as a scapegoat for every ill and problem in Arizona. If the schools weren't great, it wasn't because we have the lowest funding per pupil ratio in the country. The reason the schools aren't great is because there are so many of the quote unquote illegals in the schools. If crime was high, it's not because we didn't have enough programs for our children or enough police officers, because we believe in low taxations in Arizona. It's, of course, is because of the undocumented community. Everything was an excuse. If there was a problem, we were the problem. As a matter of fact, it got so bad that at one point, one of the utility regulators was complaining about the high price of energy, and he had suggested that they were going to start searching the houses to make sure whoever is hooked up to the energy grid, to make sure that they were legally in the country. I mean, this is how ridiculous it was getting. And many of us young Latinos and Latinas started looking around at our leadership, our Latino leadership, and realized that part of the problem wasn't necessarily that we were getting picked on. Part of the problem is that we made ourselves our target by being so politically weak and just really an open opportunity. And when we went and spoke to some of our political elders, our leaders in the community, they basically, told us to let this pass. This happens every couple of years. You guys don't really understand. And eventually it just kept on getting worse and worse. And then altogether, one year, many of us decided to run for office. And I was actually the only one to win. It was a total of 6 of us that ran for the State House and State Senate. And the one thing, it felt weird being among your cohorts, the only one to win. But the one thing that I realized is that one person winning a race, it doesn't make nothing. It's not a movement. And what we were trying to do, trying to start a movement of bold new political Latino activism in Arizona. And I actually tried year in, year out to really start pushing the envelope and get, excuse me.
Bless you.
Sorry about
Bless
that. I'm allergic to non-activity.
It's allergic to me, I think.
Yes. Well,
We all are.
But it wasn't until a couple years later that I started bringing in other leaders, both Latinos and Latinas, and then we were actually able to really start turning the tide in Arizona, the conversation about Arizona. And I was very lucky to actually have met a lot of people here in Washington, D.C. that really, taught me that. I see Delia Garcia. I see you. That's you out there, right? Delia, if you know her, Delia has been from day one. She's a mentor to many Latinas running for office, and really taught me what it meant to be a true Latino leader. Larry Gonzalez, I'm sure, is out here somewhere. Larry, if you stand up, I still won't be able to see you. So, but I can make short jokes. But Larry, it's been a good friend and mentor of mine for many years, and there's just many other people here that I really learned from. And now that I'm here in Congress, one of the things that I really do pride myself on is being involved, especially with a couple of the committees that goes out and recruits candidates. And you'll be happy to know that, especially among the panelists up here, we're actively out there recruiting Latinos and Latinas to run for Congress. We're not just standing by and being happy with what we have. We are out there searching in California, Texas. We have in Maryland. We have in Florida future members of Congress that we know are going to be a great addition to the country. And we really hope that many of you guys will join in supporting a lot of these candidates, because we know that we're going to work hard. You have some of the most talented people in the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, but we're only as strong as our numbers are. So the more we get here to join us, the more that we're going to be able to work stronger in a more effective way for the Latino community. But with that, I will hand it over to the person that I'm always confused for by other members of Congress and vice versa, Pete Aguilar.
So now Ruben's doing my job.
Ah, sorry.
Very competitive up here.
You always got to focus on the next job you want, right?
I'll have a comeback, but not right away. I'm going to carefully plot this out. So as you heard, thank you very much, Ruben. The next to give us a sense about his vision, the reason that he ran, please help me welcome Pete Aguilar from California.
Thanks, Michelle, and my cheering section of Loretta Sánchez there. Appreciate that. No, what Ruben's alluding to is Ruben Gallego, Pete Aguilar. There was a Pete Gallego, which unfortunately lost last term, and he'll be back this next term. Yep. So it's a lot of Petes and a lot of Gallegos going on. So frequently it happens. Thank you so much. Can I go on record as being, Michelle, the first person, first CHCI to actually request that their time go on? There we go. Okay, yeah, you can start.
I didn't have a timer, so I just kept going. Sorry.
Start counting me down. I want to keep Michelle on task here. That's generally our job.
That is generally our job.
Those of you that know her understand that. Thank you so much. Thank you to CHCI and thank you to Michelle. We tease her, but she is an incredible leader in Congress, and to our other colleagues here with the CHC. I think Linda would be happy. We probably have a quorum right here of CHC. we frequently don't at our meetings. But I wanted to just share a little bit about my district and how I came to Congress. I represent California's 31st district, right next door to Norma Torres, halfway between Los Angeles and Palm Springs. And my seat was the only Democratic pickup that we had in California, and the only Hispanic seat that we were able to pick up nationally in 2014. And we did that through the work of the CHC and other members, but we did that by working hard in the district, and one of my biggest advocates is here, and that's Loretta Sánchez, who was mentioned earlier. Loretta, I ran unsuccessfully, full disclosure, I ran unsuccessfully in 2012. And Loretta was one of the first calls. And like Ruben said, the importance of other members of Congress reaching out and recruiting those folks to make a difference in their communities. Loretta, in only a way Loretta can say, said, I don't care what happened, you need to stick this out, you need to come to Congress, we need you. And for someone to do that, right after I had lost a campaign with less than 1,000 votes in the same year that the president, in California's jungle primary, which some of you are familiar with, where we had multiple candidates running, and I came up 1,000 votes short from surviving to the top two, and we had actually 2 Republicans make it to the November runoff. So you had a district that voted 57% for President Obama, and they only had 2 candidates on the November ballot, and both of them were Republicans. And so it caused us to redouble our efforts and focus on our constituents, on the community, and it took other members of Congress reaching out and convincing me to do it again, including the support of the folks up here on stage with me. I grew up in San Bernardino. I grew up in a tough city. Right now, San Bernardino has some of the highest unemployment rate in the nation, and we know the importance of jobs in our community, and we know the creation of jobs is so important to turning the tide. And I grew up in a community, in a household raised by my grandmothers and my parents. My parents got a divorce when I was younger, when I was in junior high, and the importance that my grandmothers played in my life. So I just wanted to take just a quick minute to tell you the people who made an impact in my life. And my 2 grandmothers who were in my first campaign ad, one of them wanted to, the other didn't. And that's a very funny story, but that ad is still on YouTube, and they just made such an important impact in my life, encouraging me to continue with public service, to be involved, and it's the same reason why I tell young people, just like Norma mentioned, and just exactly what Ruben does. I mean, we don't care what your vocation is, what you want to do. You have to be involved. You have to be involved in your community. This is a very public way that we're being involved. But joining a board of directors for a local nonprofit, being a community activist, knocking on doors, and championing issues that are important to you and your neighborhoods, that's how we make change. That's how we make positive change in our communities. And I've been privileged to work on a couple issues. I became mayor of my hometown. Knew Norma at the local level and was happy to see her success and to see the changing nature of our region, which is evolved and had one Latino member of Congress, and now has Dr. Ruiz and Norma Torres and myself. We have multiple members of Congress now in a high growth region within Southern California. I've worked with Ruben on issues in the House Armed Services Committee. He's been an incredible, thoughtful advocate, supporting dreamers and fighting for comprehensive immigration reform. We continue to talk about creation of jobs as a caucus and as a community, and the importance that plays. And I'm just happy to be here as part of this class of the 114th Congress. It has been an incredible ride, and I'm just honored to be up on stage here with these individuals and my classmates. Thank you so much.
I think that you'll share my opinion that these 3 are incredible. We're 26 strong in the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, and our own diversity gives us great opportunity, as each of the members described, in representing our communities and really focusing on what we can do to strengthen not only the Hispanic community in and of itself, but to create an environment where that representation reflects the priorities of Hispanic families across the country. And we are all still fighting, and thank you for helping us us in that fight for immigration reform. But your first year has seen no dearth of hot-button, very difficult issues, from some of the most harrowing and difficult decisions to make on foreign policy and global trade, not to mention that we just averted a government shutdown, and we're going to continue to have significant budget negotiation debates that are perilous in terms of really making a difference in the way in which each of us are fighting for these communities. So the second question for the panel is to talk to us about this first year, given that environment. What were your challenges? What surprised you the most? Anything that you want to highlight about your first year in Congress? And let's start this time with Ruben.
Well, the biggest challenge actually is adjusting to the calendar and being able to have a normal family life in addition to being a good member of Congress. So you have a schedule that basically demands that you fly back and forth, and especially for us, Southwest and West Coasters, our flights are long. So while we have many colleagues here that will take a 1-hour flight to Ohio or to Boston, whatever it is, we'll be taking 4 to 5 hour flights. And I think on average we spend about 40 to 45 hours in the air per month. So imagine that, if you start thinking about it. And then in addition, just being at the airport. So within that, you still have the demands of being a family man. I'm married. My mother also lives in Phoenix. I have to make sure that while I'm being a good member of Congress, that I'm also, making time to hang out with my wife, that I'm, taking my mom out to dinner, or that's the fun stuff, or to make sure that I do the honey-do list that my wife puts on an Excel sheet.
We all have a honey-do list.
Yeah, well, mine's a shared Google Doc, so it's just, it's hard to delete. But I got to get it done, and here I can, order generals around. I could go to anything and demand answers. I go home, and if the bathroom needs cleaning, like I'm cleaning it,
right.
And it's a very humbling experience. Getting that balance down, which took me about, I think, 4 to 5 months, was the most important thing. It's made everything else easy. Yeah, there are difficult situations here and decisions. I'm fairly laid back, not because I don't think about the issues. It's not because I don't think the issues are important, but I was in the Marines, and once you've been to combat, making decisions in suits and ties, so much more easier than when people are shooting at you. So, I think I've enjoyed everything I've learned so far, and I'm continue to look forward to it. But I really do think the home balance life is probably the most daunting thing I think you have to deal with, and I think once you get that done, I think everything else kind of falls in place.
Thank you. Pete, what surprised you the most, or what challenges?
Yeah, what Ruben said is exactly right, and it's probably the thing that Loretta didn't tell me about when she called me and reminded me that I should run again.
We might fib a little in those recruiting calls.
Right, yeah, absolutely. No, I mean it's getting that piece right. I mean, I'm not going to have a strong foundation unless everybody at home, for me, is happy. And I'm celebrating my 10th anniversary with my bride later this week.
Wow, that's fantastic.
We have 2 boys in elementary school nearby, so making sure that I can FaceTime with them and hang out with them on the weekends and have enough downtime to really just shut off and spend time with them. Ruben's played video games with my kids. He knows
Clash of Clans. I taught him a couple things.
He did.
That makes me very nervous.
They sat on the bus together the whole time. It was great. It was Ruben and my 6-year-old. No, but I mean, so I'll start with that. I mean, and so it is a very partisan environment. You asked us about, what we're learning here. It's a very partisan environment, and believe me, it's not lost on any of us how frustrating it is that the other side is patting their backs and taking pride in keeping the government open for 10 weeks. You know, at the local level, and my two colleagues spent time at the state level. I mean, you pass budgets in 12-month increments, 24-month increments, and the fact that, you know, this group can't get it right and is rejoicing with 10 weeks, but not even all of them are rejoicing. 151 of them voted no. Right. So the alternative being, you know, shutting the government down. And tonight and tomorrow, they're going to put bills up to continue an assault on women's reproductive rights. I mean, you know, there are frustrations, you know, that we feel in this partisan environment. But I'll tell you that there are, you know, those nuggets of collegiality and camaraderie that each of us have with our colleagues on both sides of the aisle. I was able to introduce my first bill, a jobs bill, with bipartisan support. I know each of us spends time with our Republican colleagues in the committees, and you can spend some time off camera with them on both sides of the aisle, learn a little bit more about their districts, or occasionally we'll travel with our colleagues as well, and that's another opportunity to hear a little bit more about them as people, and to understand them and their families. And you know, we're all going through the same things individually. So with our home life and wanting to connect with our kids. So for me, I've kind of gravitated to those members on both sides of the aisle that have young kids. Like me, and know what it's like to entertain them and take them to museums when they're here in town, take them on the floor of the House, which are just very special opportunities. We went bowling in the White House with a couple members, a couple Republican members who have young kids. You know, those types of opportunities and that collegiality, I think, is a little bit lost within the dysfunction that we all know exists. But there are those nuggets where you really get the sense of the individuals, and you really, you know, have that hope of wanting to connect and pass things on a bipartisan basis. We just need more of it to continue.
All right, thank you very much. Norma.
I would agree with everything that, you know, has been said. I think what has been more shocking for me is how hard we work and how much we do to do nothing. I mean, seriously, when you think about just getting to work from California, Southern California, to DC, and all of the work that it takes to, you know, get our districts up and running, get our offices here in DC up and running, and how much little we have to show for, not we as Democrats, but in California, for example, I was part of the majority party. When I was elected, we had a $30 billion deficit. The Republicans refused to work with us to get anything done. As far as they were concerned, we should cut every program that was important in our communities, and we should shut government down. We refused to do that. We worked hard, and we worked together as one unit, the Democrats did. And we were able to bring down that $30 billion deficit to what, you know, when I left last year, we had a $3 billion surplus, and I'm very, very proud of that. Now, those decisions that we made, not everything was popular. We did have to cut programs that were very, very important in my community, but we did what we needed to do in order to keep government running, because we knew that at the end of the day, as a 911 dispatcher, when people call 911, they don't say, I am a Republican, I need an ambulance, I am a Democrat, I need an officer. They need services. And that's our primary duty here in Congress. But when we get here, it feels like many of my colleagues have forgotten why they came to Congress. And I think that that's why it's so important for all of us to be involved and to have a voice in the process, to continue to remind them so that they don't lose their way. The hardest part, I think, is staying grounded when you're so far away from home. My husband, who I've been married to for 29 and a half years.
That's another clapping right there.
You know, he sees it as a personal challenge to keep me grounded. And when I'm home, I have to get up early. regardless of the time change. I still have to get up early and walk with him, 3 miles around my neighborhood, because he wants the community to see me. When I'm in my sweats and my hair up in a ponytail and a t-shirt, people walk up to me and they feel comfortable to ask questions. And this last weekend, for example, I'm sorry, my time is up.
Finish up.
Quickly? Oh. People wanted to know, why did we not care enough about the 9/11 workers, that we have not passed that bill in Congress? So I'll end with that and continue to share as we continue the dialogue.
Well, I appreciate that. I think that folks really do have questions about the challenges that we face as an institution, Congress, and as individuals in trying to navigate a system that with 435 members in the House is arduous on its best day, but in this climate is becoming increasingly more frustrating. Although each member, I think, particularly the Hispanic Caucus, is very effective at meeting the needs and challenges of their own constituents and their own communities. And each of those members brings their own expertise and priorities in making a difference for the country. And so talk to us a little bit about your objectives. What do you want to get done in Congress, or what your priority is? And let's start with you, Pete.
Thanks, Michelle. And exactly what Michelle said. I mean, the diversity of the Hispanic Caucus, I think, is something that we should spend a moment talking about as well. I mean, Norma's talked about her extensive knowledge and background within public safety. Ruben and his knowledge of the VA and his military service. And so many members of the Hispanic Caucus bring other things to the table. Other policy issues that are important. Now, of course, for each one of us, we are passionately supportive of comprehensive immigration reform, and we work every day to encourage our colleagues and to shine a light on that issue within the current political environment. But we also have other issues and policy areas that we want to focus on. For me, in my area, I mentioned it a little bit. I have San Bernardino, Riverside, Ontario, the MSA, the fancy word for region that the Bureau of Labor Statistics uses in Norma's area and in mine, has the highest unemployment rate of the top 50 MSAs. It still has a 7.1% unemployment rate today. We've seen in California that as the recovery has started and begun closer to the coast, as it gets inland, it becomes a little more difficult. And so, making sure that our communities, have access to good paying jobs, access to health care, access to education, these are the pillars of what I want to work on and the things that are important to my constituents in my district. So those are the focus areas and the topics that I hope I can spend a little bit more time on. I just was fortunate enough to moderate a panel on education. And as the beneficiary of a Pell Grant, I wouldn't be here without that Pell Grant. I wouldn't be here without that work-study job, without my parents, kicking in, and the student loan debt that I had when I graduated. I mean, all of those things, put me in this position to succeed. Put me in this position to get a job working for the governor of California, which I did right out of school. A professor took a special interest in me, and I came to Washington, D.C. on an internship, and that was my second time on an airplane, was coming to Washington, D.C. And, the importance of seeing you folks, the professional class, the community in this district, working hard, working long, being passionate about policy, that really opened my eyes to this world and to the importance of being involved. So I worked for the governor of California. I became the youngest member of the city council in the city where we live. Became mayor after that, and was able to have success by being open and transparent. We had coffee with the councils where community members would come and have a casual discussion with your members of the city council. We've adopted that and continue that to this day. We have Coffee with Your Congressman next week at a local community college. And it's that level of connectedness as a community that we need to get back to. And that's how I use the community as a sounding board for policy ideas and issues that are of interest to all of us.
Thank you very much. We can go down the line this way. All right, Ruben, what are your policy priorities? What do you want to get done in Congress?
A lot.
Excellent.
Yeah. Well, I mean, one of the benefits of Pete and I, and Norma, we're one of the younger members of Congress, so I look at it more as what
I only look young. I'm not.
Yeah, I'm not. Hey, I play my politics right though. Look, we have years and years to be here, and for me, especially in the first couple of years, it's just really getting down to the basics. So right now, for me, it's constituent services.
Yeah.
I have the Phoenix VA is right across the street from my district. It's had a lot of problems. I have a growing VA population in my state, as well as just veterans that aren't even in my district, but in other districts that feel more comfortable calling my office because they know that I'm a veteran and I'm a combat veteran, and they feel that we're going to give them better services, which I don't think is true. All the members of Congress, whether they're Democrats or Republicans, will give great service to these veterans, but they feel like they're calling us, and we accept that. So doing that has been very important. And then long term, I do worry about a couple of things. Obviously, Congress immigration reform, but I do think that the investments that traditionally have been going into kind of your growing populations in this country are no longer there, which I think are going to have extreme detrimental effect in the future. But for example, when you have the baby boomers growing in this country, that's when you have the largest amount of investment in education, whether it's K through 12 or college. Now we have a burgeoning millennial population, which is also one of the most diverse populations ever. It leans more brown, less white, extremely young, about 80 million people. But for the first time, I think really in the modern history of the United States, you have the reverse happening. You have less investment in education, K through 12 education, and as well as college education. So even college affordability is now out. So, if we think that we're going to have the same results that we got from the baby boomers who had this great investment by the country, and they ended up being extremely productive citizens, ended up bringing us the modern economy we have right now, a very middle-class economy for many years. But if we think we're going to be able to have that in the future, but we're not investing in that future workforce, I think we're going to have a very rude awakening in 10 to 20 years. And that will severely affect not just obviously the Latino community, but the whole national economy and what we understand as a middle-class America. So for me personally, kind of being involved in that long-term fight of trying to bring the investment back into your future workforce, which happens to be Latino, I think is going to be one of my goals as long as I'm in Congress.
Terrific. Thank you. Norma.
So for me, I'm very focused on a transportation bill. My district is a district of commuters. Everything that comes through the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach end up in my district, where it gets redistributed throughout the U.S. So good roads, bridges are very, very important to me, as well as affordable housing. I was the chair of the Housing and Community Development in the Assembly for 4 years. That has been, my focus and my passion. It's not what I wanted to do, but I was sort of pushed into that job. And as I told you earlier, we never know when that call to duty, will come, and we have to be ready to accept those responsibilities. California is struggling with affordable housing, as many communities that you probably live in, and I'm very concerned about the lack of progress in Congress and how that translates to my constituents. I often feel that I have to play defense on their behalf. Constituency services, we have been very, very focused with veterans. As an immigrant from Guatemala, Central Americans across the U.S. seem to flock to me and my office. We get calls from all over the U.S., people seeking assistance, with a variety of issues. I am, I think that we work for the American people, not just for our district. So if people call our offices, we're going to try to help them in any way that we can.
Well, please join me in thanking them, because now it's the time. We're not leaving, and I want your hands ready. We're going to take questions from the audience, but you can see why it's so easy, even in your second term, to be inspired by the incredible energy and enthusiasm by the newest members of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus. I agree. All right, so we're going to take questions from the audience. I need you to raise your hand, and I have help in the audience with individuals who have mics on either side of the room. So if you raise your hands, and I'm going to start on the very left. There's a woman right here in purple, I think.
Hi, Sonia Martin Solis from California with the California Teachers Association and NAEA. Earlier you were asked, like, what your hopes are and whatever. I want to know what your greatest frustration is as a freshman Congress member.
All right, so I think everybody heard that, but to really, what is that greatest frustration? And Norma, we'll just start with you again.
I think not being able to work across the aisle the way we do, the way that I have experienced doing so when I served as mayor, city council, and even in the state legislature. We worked very closely with our colleagues on the other side of the aisle. I find myself in DC reaching out to the folks that I serve with in the Assembly and in the Senate, and it's very difficult for them to work with us on issues. I haven't figured out why yet, except maybe they, fear getting reprimanded from, their leadership. There's really no excuse for us not to be working together on the issues that are important to our communities.
Thank you. Pete? I know you thought I was going to say
that. Well, you were looking at him, so even you're doing it.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think exactly what Norma said. I mean, the intense, and I mentioned it earlier, that kind of partisanship that won't allow things to move forward. At the local level, I knew my city council members. I knew there were 3 Democrats on the city council and 2 Republicans, even though it was a nonpartisan seat. I knew what was important to those folks who maybe we split on who we would support for president. I knew the local issues that were important to them. And I tried to highlight those, and we tried to compromise, and we balanced 6 straight budgets as a result of working together. And I think that it's that kind of intense, partisanship. And as Norma said, when we all have conversations, we see that there's a path forward. I think the difficulty is a political path, and I think those of us up here, we understand there's governance and there's politics, and you get elected on the political side, and then it's a time to govern, and then it's a time to work and get things done. And it seems oftentimes with the other side that they're held captive by a small group in their district, and they're afraid, and in many cases they'll be penalized and pay a political price by compromising and working with us or agreeing with the president. In some of these districts, they are so gerrymandered. If a Republican member of Congress agrees with the president, their phones light up in the district. And it's unfortunate, even on issues where they may agree.
And they do agree.
So that's I think the biggest frustration and difficulty that we face. I want to be very optimistic and hopeful, and I am, but that's the truth of your question.
Ruben?
I think for me is the speed of how things move here, and this is more for when I interact with the federal government for my constituents, whether it's the VA, Department of Defense, or one of the other Department of Labor, HUD, all these, right? And if any of you guys are out there, I'm not really talking about you, but I'm talking about in general. I have some problems with constituents that that are having bad interactions with the executive branch. And though I have figured out the solution, though we know what the problem is, in order for us to have a resolution, it takes way too long. And at the same time, while you are a member of Congress, you still can't get a lot done for your constituents, and it frustrates them. For example, the FAA, and I'm openly throwing them out on the bus, under the bus on this one, through a non-public disclosure option, decided to move the air patterns moving out of Phoenix. Totally altered the noise traffic patterns, and didn't do a public hearing process, and now all my constituents are mad. And they want to know why they're paying taxes and why this very bureaucratic and unresponsive government is not responding to their wants and did not go through the proper process that everyone else has to. And when I talk to the FAA, they really have no good excuse, just that they don't really want to change it, because if they change it, then it causes more problems. That's very frustrating. But on the other end of this, I always remind people, I'm 35, I'm going to be here for a long, long time, and whatever I remember in my first year that happened, it's going to carry through with me. So for a lot of these agencies, they will come and go, agency heads will come and go, but members of Congress, we stick around, and I will remember those that didn't, that weren't helpful to my constituents.
Ow. All right, we've got a question over here. Thanks, and then we'll go to the back. Right here, yes.
Okay. Hello, my name is Alfredo. I serve as a CHCI intern this fall. I just want to say thank you for the leadership that you do, especially in the state of California. I'm from California, specifically to Pete, as one of your constituents who studies political science at Cal State San Bernardino. So thank you so much. It's reasons and your stories that make me want to run for office one day and do something for my community. A lot of the things that have been discussed at this conference have been voter turnout, and getting the Latinos to go out and vote and the Hispanic community to go and make a difference. But the thing that I see in the communities that I've lived in is there's not those resources. Either they don't have a car or they can't get to a polling place. So how do we get those individuals to go out and vote and to empower the Latino community to be registered to vote who don't have those resources?
All right, so I'm going to let Pete go first, but you better be giving Alfredo a job here, because that was a great endorsement.
It was a great endorsement and a great plug.
Good job.
Yeah, thank you. I bought him lunch for that. I'm just joking. No, thank you for the question, and thank you for the compliment. The area that we come from is tough and struggling, and I want to make sure that there are individuals who are willing to step up, like you as well, to spend some time and to learn this process. It's incredibly important. When you talk about resources and getting out the vote, I mean, it goes back, translates exactly to Ruben's point and Norma's point about the politics of how we matter and how we make a difference in our communities, how we continue to increase and grow the map of Latinos who are serving at all levels, not just in Congress, on local school boards, on city councils. Those are incredibly important positions that set policy that governs, how our communities function. But I agree with your point. I mean, we need to, how do you do it? Gosh, I mean, Ruben's knocked on thousands of doors, and Norma and I have at the local level too. I mean, you do it. Unfortunately, by dragging folks, to the polls, and by continuing to educate them, registering them to vote. I just saw my buddy, Secretary of State Alex Padilla, outside earlier. I hope you've heard from him. He's got a great bill that passed in California that basically changes the motor voter law and makes it more of an opt-out system than an opt-in. So now when people when people get their driver's license, they're automatically registered to vote. That's an important tool to getting people, and we know from the political aspect, the people we communicate to in our political hats are those folks who vote 2 of 5, 3 of 5, 4 of 5, 5 of 5 elections. Those are the people who get door knocks and calls. And so we need to make sure that our folks continue to show up to the polls. We have to drive them there, talk to local campaigns and make sure you have people on election day driving people to the polls when you're making those calls. But really, I think the kind of vote by mail program is really what's going to matter. We have to make sure that our community votes by mail They can do it in the comfort of their own home. They can meet as a family, as I know we do, to meet and talk about the issues. You know, that's how we're going to move the needle and start to elect more Latinos to local office and federal office.
Right. I'm not supposed to do this as the moderator. In fact, I got lectured just before I came on stage. But as we're all, there's been an undertone by not only the incredible panelists today, but I can see it in a couple of the questions about what are we going to do about voter engagement and engaging, in generally speaking, the Latino community or Hispanic community. In my state, that's a community that's poor and has higher unemployment rates than the rest of the community. And the 50th year of the Voting Rights Act, where we're struggling to reauthorize and make improvements in a country where we are setting up democracies all around the world. We are creating barriers for people to vote, not creating an environment where people can vote. And voting by mail and opting out are things that if we can get our community to set those policies at the local level, we will create literally a firestorm of activity and voting and creating the kinds of priorities that we want in this country that ultimately will make the difference in improving the lives of the families that we care about. And so thank you very much for answering that question, Pete, and thank you for asking it, Alfredo. We really appreciate it.
One more quick thing, I'm sorry, is let's also not just be happy after 2016.
That's right.
Because Latinos are going to show up and we're going to come out and we're going to vote. You know, our measure of success should also be those off years when traditionally Latinos don't show up and vote. 2014, 2018, those non-presidential years. We need to redouble our efforts and use the successes that we're building toward right now in 2016 and redouble them leading into those off-presidential years where historically we have a tough time turning out.
All right, I'm going to go all the way to the back, and then I'm going to come, just so you know what we're doing. Back here at the left middle, and then I think we'll have time for this question at this table here. So all the way in the back.
Yeah, hi, sorry. My name's Henry. My question is, what are each of you doing in your respective communities to address or even alleviate climate change?
Mitigate climate change?
To address or alleviate climate change.
Oh, climate change.
So,
right. Thank you, Ruben.
As a matter of fact, as running, when I ran for Congress, you know, people told me all the time, like, why are you talking about climate change? You're Latino, should be only talking about immigration reform, which is really insulting to begin with. But I actually spoke out and was a very, very strong supporter of climate change legislation. Now, obviously, we've kind of hit a brick wall here. But I've teamed up with League of Conservation Voters. They have a program called CHCI that's operating in my district. Is Jennifer Allen here, actually? I don't know if she's here for lunch. I know she was in there. Okay. So CHCI is working with the League of Conservation Voters and some of us members of Congress, Latino members of Congress, to really engage the Latino community in environmental issues from a Latino environmental justice perspective. So about 2 weeks ago, I had a town hall to talk with a local EPA director to talk about the president's coal power plant emissions plan, right? And basically to talk about how, from a perspective of the Latino community, how that plan is actually really important, not just obviously for climate change and reducing our carbon emissions, but also in terms of clean air, because many of our communities are the ones that are next to some of these dirty coal emitters and are causing us the high rates of asthma. So you know, we're actively involved in being supportive of, I think, what's a very aggressive executive that I think is taking the right steps, as well as is being involved in encouragement of more use of renewals, whether it's through the Department of Defense and trying to encourage renewal technology investment through research development grants or tax credits, and then through our other labs, for example, the Sandia Lab and the other defense labs. So there's a lot of things that are going on, but I think actively speaking as a politician, as a Latino, and going on not just what you'd consider regular Anglo media, but also talking to your Telemundo Univision about climate change, I think it's extremely important, because It's a great way to really get your community involved in something that they already are interested in, but haven't seen it really vocalize.
That's right. Now, to get to those other two questions, we may have to, if that's all right with our last,
Right.
okay. So let's go to the question in the middle.
Hi, I'm Adriana Espinosa. I'm from an organization called Open Primaries, and I wanted to ask a question about partisanship. I know that you all mentioned it as being a major frustration to you a little bit earlier. Representative Torres, you said that it was very frustrating coming from local city government and then state government. In California, city government and the state legislature both have nonpartisan elections. And in California's top two system has done a lot to expand the number of Latino candidates that are running. And do you think nonpartisan election reform could be good to sort of combat the gridlock and the partisanship that you guys are talking about?
First of all, let's not confuse nonpartisan to open primaries, because they're very, very different. As a state senator, when I was running for state senate, I was one of the first races to run in an open primary type of campaign. It has put, my experience, that it has put a lot more money into politics. I was the only Latina in the state senate, and when I left, there are now 0 Latinas in the California state senate. So that didn't help, add more Latinas to state politics. Then our numbers have actually dwindled, both between the Assembly and the Senate. I think that, what has happened, it's supposed to bring about more moderate candidates. It has not, even though we have had a commission that has been made up of members of our community throughout California. The lines that were drawn, I think, are great, but in some districts, they are still either very, very Democratic districts, so we elect very, very liberal members in those districts, which means that those elections will cost more because you'll have 4, 5, 6 Democrats running against each other. Mm-hmm. And the Republican districts are still very, very Republican. So they have gone even further to the right. My opinion is that it really has put a lot more money into politics. I want to go back for a moment.
Yeah, but we've got very little time, so I'm going to ask you to wrap up. I know that you want to say something.
Because we're going to deal with this in
We're going to get to that question, by golly.
Right.
To the issue of, why are people not voting? Let's stop making excuses for ourselves. We are not the party of no se puede. We are the party of sí se puede. And for California specifically, you can register online. So go to sos.gov. If you live in LA County, lavote.net. You can ask for an absentee ballot. For the very first time in my life, I'm going to have to vote absentee. I don't like to vote absentee, but I will, because there is a college election while I will be here in DC. There's no excuse for us not to vote. We don't vote because we have not hit rock bottom, and we have not seen for ourselves what our absence at the polls has cost our communities. And what is it going to take for us to wake up and see that? I think that is the question that we need to ask of ourselves and our neighbors within our community.
I appreciate that challenge to our community.
Yeah,
Go, Ruben.
Yeah, we're going to deal with open primaries. I think what's going to end up happening is, people are going to talk about partisanship. What we're going to end up doing in Arizona, if we pass open primaries, is that we're going to end up losing a lot of Latino members of Congress, because the one thing that the reformers or so-called reformers think about, they only think about in their spectrum of partisanship, but really what a lot of people are voting on right now is on race. And what will happen in Arizona, where we have a lot of majority and minority districts, is that there will be many Anglo candidates are going to be running within Latino districts. And what you'll find is some of these Anglo candidates are going to be winning in Latino districts because of the multiple Latinos running, versus the one angle that's running. So while there's going to be this great idea that, oh, we're going to be all bipartisan, which is not going to happen anyway, even if these things happen, what you're going to end up seeing is a delusion of a lot of Latino elected officials.
Viability of those races.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Last question.
Mary Lou de Leon Science. I'm a professor at University of California, Davis. What are you doing to increase funds for the National Science Foundation and the NIH? Questions that have been brought up about improving transportation, taking care of climate changes, these are the scientific community can address, but more money is needed through the National Science Foundation. Our families suffer from health disparities. We not only need NIH support to reduce, but to eliminate through scientific study. So what are you doing? And then the traineeships to train the next generation of scientists and healthcare professionals, and to change their face to be to Latinas and Latinos. So what is being done?
Right. Anybody want to take that one on?
28 seconds.
Yeah, we got 20 seconds, and we're
Sure,
going to actually close this.
And that's a little bit of what the budget discussion and budget fight is now, right? I mean, that's what we're fighting for. We're fighting for, in Washington, language, non-defense discretionary funding. That's what Democrats are fighting for. Republicans want to raise the spending caps just for the military, which, by the way, the president supports and congressional Democrats support. But we just don't want to raise those caps. We know the importance of investments in science and research. We know the investments of education. So that's what we're fighting for. That's what this whole budget discussion is about, is making sure both sides of the House, defense and non-defense, get treated equitably, and we make the investments that you're talking about. And that we
lift the sequester so that we've got the opportunity to meet those priorities for today and the future. All right, will you all join me in thanking again this incredible panel?